Greetings and welcome to this edition of the Pastor's Study. Remember that these sermons are being brought to you by the Church of God Seventh-day with headquarters in Salem, West Virginia. If you would like any additional information, please contact us and we'll be glad to get back to you, even including a ministerial visit if that's what you are requesting. I have a little story for you today, like I normally do, and the teacher is asking some of her students, and she's saying she has a young class, and she's saying, where do, apples come from? So little Susie answers, well, they come from apple trees. And she says, very good, where do pears come from? And a little boy answers up, he says, well, they come from pear trees. And she said, excellent. She said, now, where do dates come from? So the class was silent for a little bit, and one little boy answered up. He said, they come from calendars. Little minds, right? Little minds. Well, we continue today with our study in the book of Daniel. This is, I think, our fourth installment that we've been studying. And of course, we've given you a lot of background information with regard to why Daniel was here. And we ended up last week at the end of chapter 4, and we're heading on into chapter 5. And I left you last time, I was talking about the person that starts out in chapter 5. That's a man by the name of Belshazzar, the king. He made a great feast. That would be found in Daniel 5:1. And I think I left you last time with regard to there's some question about who this gentleman is. And we know that he's a descendant of King Nebuchadnezzar. The reference comes, there'll be some in the reading where it talks about your father. And of course, there's some references where it'll say it's maybe he could be the grandson. I was reading something online this morning where it said that possibly he's the great-grandson. But I think what we should really latch on to here is that this man is a descendant of King Nebuchadnezzar, probably grandson, somewhere in and around that relationship. And this, I think if we go by the dates that I have in my Bible, and I don't know how accurate they are, but it starts out with, I have a heading where it says that where Nebuchadnezzar was restored from his animal state, right? Remember, he was cursed and reduced to an animal, and he was roaming around the gardens, in a sense, there for 7 years, and then his body and mind were restored to him, and of course he comes back and he praises the God of heaven. This seems to be a little bit further down the line, of course, and closer to the end of the Babylonian kingdom. So this could possibly be about 24, 25 years later, about 539 BC. So Belshazzar, the king, right, we'll go back to 5:1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar, you see that father, and then the reference, of course, says to me that Nebuchadnezzar was father of Belshazzar, in the biblical sense that David is called father of Jesus. And then later on there's one that says grandfather. But nonetheless, he's going to use the vessels that Nebuchadnezzar took when he conquered the tribe of Judah. And they went into the temple and they took all the vessels that were used. Now keep in mind that the vessels that were used in the temple were they were dedicated. They were kind of sanctified for that use. They were put aside for that use. They weren't used for anything else. So now what we have is this man, like a pagan, a heathen king, who is going to take these dedicated vessels and he's going to defile them. That's what he's going to do. Not that they're haven't been defiled already, but he's going to further defile them, right? So he goes on here in chapter 5. It says, "Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them." This was like I don't know if I could say orgy, but it was a pretty probably drunken party in a sense. So it says they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. Now keep in mind, I'm sure if he was not alive, he was told what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. And when Nebuchadnezzar came to his senses, he praised the God of heaven. And if we go back to, this would be chapter 4, verse 36, it says, "At the same time my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom mine honor and my brightness returned unto me. And my counselors and my lords sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol the honor, the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase." And so these are the last words we have from Nebuchadnezzar, in the pages or the verses of the Bible. And so he comes to the recognition that, Daniel's God is God, and he recognizes him. Now we're about 25 years later, and this descendant of his is, it's like he's forgetting all about that. It's like it never happened. And, we're having a party, we're drinking, and we're going to toast these various, false gods, really, because they really cannot do anything. Gold and silver, you take a lump of gold, you have the biggest amount of gold and set it right on your desk. It can't do anything for you. Now, yes, you can take it and you can buy things with it and you can trade it for, other kinds of money or other minerals or whatever, diamonds or whatever it is you would like. But it's still, if you left it on your desk and you ask it to do something for you, it can't. It cannot do anything. And yet these people, and we still have people today that will do the same thing, worship at the temple of, gold, silver, copper, whatever it would be, thinking that that is going to really help them in this particular life. So, of course, what happens? We have this famous event that takes place, and we still use the expression today in our everyday usage. It's like the handwriting's on the wall. In other words, can't you see what the handwriting on the wall is telling you? And this is what happens to this particular gentleman. Well, maybe I shouldn't use the word gentleman, but this is what happens to this individual. In chapter 5, verse 5, it says, "In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote." This has got to be something pretty scary. Turn around and look at your wall and see a hand just writing on the wall. There's nothing else attached. It's not like looking up to, the front of a classroom and seeing, a teacher writing on a board, pointing out something on a board, doing something with some kind of a teaching aid. We have this drunken party which is basically taking place, and he is now seeing something. I'm sure he's probably wondering whether he's really seeing what he's seeing. So then it's in 6, it says, then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against the other. I mean, this guy was scared to death. And, he should have been scared to death before he started all this. But, of course, this is after the fact. He's now scared to death. And just like we read in previous verses of this book, he calls out, it says, the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Okay, so he takes the same route that Nebuchadnezzar took. He called all those guys, and they come in and they couldn't do anything, and he ends up speaking with Daniel, and of course Daniel is blessed by God to be able to give him, not only in the case of the interpretation, but he's able to tell the king what he dreamed and then give him the interpretation. God had blessed Daniel with that, with that wisdom and that knowledge. So this man goes through the same exercise, calls these people. They can't tell him. They don't know. They can't help him. It's almost like, why do we still have these people in the kingdom? They're like useless and taking up space in a sense. It's almost like, get rid of these people. They haven't been able to help me at all. So, and of course, I think it says now 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, or nor let thy countenance be changed. Then it says in 11, there is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. So it's like he should have gone to Daniel first, right? But of course he didn't. We go through this exercise and see the same, the same end, really. So he calls for Daniel, and he tells Daniel that, if you can do this for me, I'm going to give you, all kinds of wonderful things, in a sense. So in verse 17, Daniel says, Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. So Daniel is going to go through, and he's going to remind this guy exactly what happened and how it came about. And, it's very interesting that if you even go into the New Testament, you'll see where some of the disciples did the same thing. When they were talking with the Israelites, they were reminding them of the history and how they got where they, were at that particular time. Daniel is pretty much doing the same thing. He's reminding him what God did for his, his, I think, grandfather, great-grandfather, and he's bringing him down the line, right? So in 18 it says, O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive, and whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him, and he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like that of beasts, like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with dew of heaven till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this. So that's what I said to you at the beginning of the chapter. He knew it. He was familiar with the history, but yet he turns around and does what he does. So in 23, but thou hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold and brass and iron and wood and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified, right? So they sing praises to these, gold, silver, iron, brass, and they leave the God of, heaven out. Not that I would want that to be, a mixture that we'll salute God here and silver here and gold there. And no, he's trying to say to him, you knew what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. You were well aware of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, and you didn't do anything about it, and you didn't praise the God of heaven, and yet you're using his dedicated vessels. So, I mean, it's almost like, does that make sense to you, Belshazzar? Because if you really think about it, it shouldn't make any sense to you. So the end of 23, whose are all thy ways hast thou not glorified, the God of heaven. 24, then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, tekel, upharsin. So he's saying that the God of heaven, who you didn't glorify, sent this hand to write this message on the wall. And now I'm going to interpret it for you. In 26 it says, this is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. I think it translated as like numbered. So the interpretation, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Your days are numbered. You're finished. 27, tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. So it was considered, and we found that you're lacking here. And so as a result, you have forfeited your kingdom. 28, Perez, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and they put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So he's about 62. What happens here is, while we're reading about another miracle that has taken place here, the figure or image that Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed about many years before is now moving. In other words, it moved from him, the head of gold, to now the arms and shoulders of silver. And Darius is the Median. It's the Medes and the Persians who will be the next kingdom that's going to replace Babylon. So Darius is first here. He's the Mede, Darius the Mede, Cyrus the Persian. So he took the kingdom being about 62 years old. Fulfilling what was previously prophecy, which now becomes, at that particular time, becomes present day for Daniel, and of course for us it is history. When we go to chapter 6, another great chapter. There are so many wonderful stories in the book of Daniel, and this is another one of them that kids learn probably in most Sunday school, Sabbath school classes, and we're going to talk about the lion's den, Daniel and the lion's den. But how did we get there? What happened? Well, in chapter 6, we start out with the history of Darius and Daniel, because remember that Daniel is still, even though he enjoys a great position within the framework of this kingdom, Babylon first, now the Medes and the Persians, he is still a captive. He's a prisoner. Now he may be, a prisoner that has privileges in a sense. Nonetheless, he's still, he's still a prisoner. He's not really free to go. At least somebody isn't telling him that. So here he is. He's serving in the capacity of this new kingdom. And it says here in chapter 6, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. And over these, 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So here we have a young Jewish man who is a prisoner or captive, who's going to be placed in command of most all of the kingdom here. So it's so important. We were talking today in our Sabbath school lesson with regard to example. And so it's really important, no matter where we go or where we find ourselves, that we set an example. And certainly Daniel did, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. He did, and he continues to. So we can see that he is truly blessed. God is seeing to it that he is being taken care of, and yet he's able to witness by doing some of the things that he does and experiencing some of the things that he's going to experience. So what happens now? Well, it's the old jealous program. The other people, the other men are almost like, this guy, we need to do something to get rid of this guy. And we've got to figure something out so we can, get rid of him. So when you see that in verse 4, it says, then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Again, we're talking about being a good example, and so Daniel was, and he conducted himself in a very proper way, but just like it always is, that some people get jealous of that. It's almost like, I can't stand that guy. I don't like that person. They drive me crazy. They're so self-righteous. There's something going on there. I know it, right? So they couldn't find any fault. Verse 5. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God, right? So they're thinking all we can do is we can, find out something that we can use against him, and we can get rid of him. So keep in mind, what is it? Wile E. Coyote, I guess, in a sense, right? Wile E. Coyote, right? 6. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said, thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save, O thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. 8. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not, wherefore King Darius signed the writing and decree. So they figured they finally had him. Darius signs this decree, which cannot be changed, and these men know Daniel's habits with regard to his God, and so they figure this is something they can use to get rid of him. Verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. So it's like, aha, we've got you. We finally got you. So they bring this, before the king and said, well, you signed that decree. You can't change your mind. It's good for 30 days. And this guy is making a petition to somebody else. So, of course, they turn around and use this against them. And the king says, okay, well, 16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. And the stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting, neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. So he was really disturbed by this because he really liked Daniel. And he was caught here. He signed this decree. They got him to sign the decree. He couldn't go back on his decree. And so he has to throw Daniel in the lion's den. We know the outcome of this. And that's what I was saying before about Wile E. Coyote. What happens is, the king is really upset about this, and he goes down there, and it says, very early, 19, then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Right. So then the king was happy, of course, and the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives, and the lions had mastery over them and brake all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. So here we have Wile E. Coyote, these other men, in a sense, trying to do something to the Roadrunner. That would be Daniel, and of course, it's a reverse of fortune. They don't benefit from what happened. In fact, they sign their own demise. I guess it's almost like what Haman did when he built the scaffold for Mordecai. That you'll find that in the book of Esther. And so we have some of these people that try to do things thinking that they are going to benefit from what they're doing to one of God's people, and they in turn suffer the consequences for their own doing. And this is what happened to these particular people. So in 25 it says, then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So we've discussed some wonderful things today historically with regard to the handwriting on the wall, the changing of the kingdoms from Babylon to the Medes and the Persians. We looked again into another one of the the biblical stories, which is true. Some people will try to tell us that they are not true. We're going to have a Sabbath school lesson in the coming weeks, which will talk about some of the Old Testament characters that are referenced in the New Testament because they were really true characters. These are not just stories. These people, you can look this up with regard to like Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians and this man, this Belshazzar and Cyrus and Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Persian, and Daniel was alive and well and living at that particular time in these kingdoms. So that concludes our study, our sermon for today. Until next time, this is Pastor Bud Randall saying goodbye, friends.